This is Main Street with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And hello, everybody, and welcome back to Main Street. Gary Allen with you, your humble host. We've got a great show for you today. A good friend of mine for many years, a funny comic. But I just want to say I'm glad that you're joining us, and all of you who will be watching on YouTube and also future on DBTV, which you could see some of my past shows. This show will be up probably next week on DBTV at 7 p.m. You go to dbtv.tv and you can watch my guests for today and have some fun and have a few laughs, because I know we're going to have some as well. My guest today is a gentleman named Ritch Shydner. Now, Ritch has been a comic, a writer, an actor. He co-wrote 2 comedy albums with Jeff Foxworthy, which were Grammy nominated. He also wrote for the Jeff Foxworthy Show. He wrote also for Roseanne Barr's show. He wrote for Bill Maher for HBO through Bill's book, True Stories, an adaptation of the comedy scene in New York in 1979. Currently, you can catch Ritch traveling the country, which we will put up here on the bottom of the screen, where you can contact him. He does a one-man show called Standup Comedy, Its History and What It Says About America. Would you please welcome a gentleman who I consider a dear friend and one of the funniest men in the world. We'll go over his TV shows that he's been on, like Married with Children. He did Roxanne, Beverly Hills Cop 2, and many other shows, as well as some of the things in his life. Would you please welcome the incomparable, the funny, the great gentleman of all time, Mr. Ritch Shydner.
All right, thank you. I've never gotten great gentleman of all time. That's the first I got to tell you.
I believe in giving
it.
Hey, listen, I believe in.
Yeah.
Listen,
it's you almost like united me. You know, like I feel like I'm Sir Ritch Shydner now. That's what I am. Well, it's no longer Ritch Shydner. I'm Sir Ritch Shydner. I'm knighted.
Sir Ritch Shydner. Oh, hello. You know, right. You know, as you know, it's right. You know, it's your right thing there for you to do. No, and I say that because when I first got going at the Comedy Strip in Fort Lauderdale, we met once, maybe twice, while you were there with your late wife, Carol. Not your late
not
wife.
Late.
Not late.
She's late.
She's late.
It's
but
you're late. She's not going to show up. No, that's the whole joke. It's the ex. It's the ex.
Yes. Well, I have an ex. I have an ex too, and I refer to as the late Gracie Allen. And she only wanted, and we met at the Improv in L.A. too, of all the funny places, which Jay Leno would often say. You met Gracie the same way I met Mavis. It's a funny thing. Anyway, no, the reason I say a gentleman and of all time is because you have always treated me, when we first met, and then I saw you about 9 years later at the Improv in LA. You looked at me, you turned around, your back was to me at first, you were talking to somebody, and then you turned around and you pointed at me and you said, "I forget your name, but I know you." And you have always treated me with the utmost respect. You have always treated me with dignity, much like the 2 guys that we were talking about the other day, the comedy duo that are separate writing on their own now. They always treated me well. So did other comedians that were there, Glenn Hirsch. Bud Friedman treated me very, very well. I was so welcome. And they all knew, except for you, apparently. Oh, I miss Bud.
Yeah.
I remember when I went to Bud and I said, this comedy thing, isn't going to work for me. He said, "No kidding, kid." And he said, "You're not your uncle." And I said, "Yeah, I know it." And that's when I went back to UCLA and studied some advertising and stuff.
Good for you.
But everybody kind of knew who my uncle was, although the comedy worked later when I was working for Engelbert and Tom and people like that. But you have an interesting background. Number one, you were a teacher for a while.
No, I substitute taught when I came out of college. I was bartending, running a bar at night, and I'd pick up substitute teaching in the daytime, mostly to just sleep off my hangover, in front of the kids.
Yeah, and you also worked.
I was not I taught last year. I taught at University of North Carolina School of the Arts. I taught there.
Yeah,
but that was just something I did for 1 year.
And I know that when you were in Washington, D.C., you worked for a congressman for a short time, and you told me you were just peddling around. Yeah.
That's all. That's always
And
the
then,
guy that would move things around. The same thing. I worked for Normal, the national organization for former marijuana law. I was the guy who just stuffed envelopes and filled orders from the back of Rolling Stone magazine, that sort of
yeah,
thing. But no, I never had any kind of. I
yeah.
went to law school. I was going to law school, so I was living in Washington D.C. I found things to do. That's all.
Where'd you go to law school in D.C.?
George Mason University.
Ah, I went to GW.
Oh, I studied there many times because I lived at 20th. I lived at 17th and N, so
Ah,
I'd go over there all the time. I'd get down to DuPont Circle and play chess, and then I worked for a bike shop repairing bikes down there on DuPont Circle. I just lived in that area for 4 years that I was there.
yeah, yeah. I was based there at Andrews, so I was,
Oh,
you know,
So that's how you went to GW from Andrews
yeah.
Air
Well,
Force Base. Yeah.
that and the University of Miami and Carnegie Mellon, and that's how I got my
Hmm.
work on Hill Street Blues and everything out in L.A. because Stephen Boschko was one of my teachers at Carnegie Mellon by accident. That's a long story that I won't get into.
Wow, that's pretty
But
good.
soon into law school though, you decided I'm going to be a stand-up, which brings up my first question: was stand-up and show business always in your headlights?
No, I didn't even know I was in. I was doing stand up for 2 years before I knew I was in a business. I mean, seriously, I didn't know show business. I didn't. I come from small town New Jersey. Nobody in my family had ever done anything like that. And
Yeah.
I was doing it for I was in law school for 2 years. I was in my second year, and Howard Vine, a classmate, thought I was funny. I thought I was funny, and we had to get another opinion. So he took me to a place, a coffee house, and I did it then, and I did it a lot, and it's increased. And then a place called El Brookman's opened, which was down in Southeast Washington, and there was a bar, and Lewis Black and myself and Kevin Rooney and Ron Zimmerman
Oh
and John
wow. Yeah.
Heyman and Bill Masters and T.P. Mulrooney, all these comics converged on this place, and that's where I met those guys, and so it sort of accelerated. That's all.
Well, I mean, it's like people say, what's the best way to be a good actor or a comic? You act. You go up and you tell your jokes and you go through with the process.
Yeah, it's all stage time for comics. It's all stage time.
And was the off time like a lot of comics? All you're thinking about is jokes, writing jokes.
It not with when I was still in school. Not no, I still had obligations. I didn't think I was going to be a comic until literally 1979. And moved up to early 79. At the end, I drove out to in the summer of 78. I drove out to California to check out the Comedy Store. And I don't know who I met there. Somebody a friend of mine. She was dealing a lot of weed out there, and so I was getting great pot, and I was taking over to the store and bribing the doorman to get in and watch the show. Richard Pryor was on stage all the time, and I was seeing all these comics. The one comic I remember besides Pryor, the only comic I remember back then besides Pryor was Tim Thomerson, who was a powerhouse comic back then.
Yes, he was.
And then a door guy. I remember I was smoking a joint with a door guy in the back outside, and I was like, I think I'll move out here. He said, "Don't move here, man." He said, "I can't get any stage time. I'm working the door to try to get stage time." And then when I came back and was in the fall of '78, Garvin's opened the first paying comedy club on the East Coast. 1979, it opened in January in DC.
Yeah.
And then they started having comics coming down from New York City and out from LA. They started coming in there, and I was the house MC along with Andy Evans. We alternated weeks, and then I met these guys, and by the spring I was like, "That's it, I'm going." I made a decision then. I didn't make the decision to go until I made the decision to go. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't think I thought I was going to be a lawyer in South Jersey and die in a car crash, drunk and driving, going to Atlantic City at 4 a.m. That's what I thought. I thought my future would be kind of that.
Well, I can tell you,
with a short life.
Bill Maher said of you that back in the days when you were doing the dingy rooms and the back rooms in New York and the tri-state area, you were a comics comic. When comedians found out you were on stage, they would run in to go and see you perform because you do. And I remember your performances. You have a stage presence that is second to none.
It's so funny. I never thought of myself as much as a performer. I think most comics see themselves either more of a performer or more of a writer, right? They're the two things you have to do. You have to perform and mostly write, unless you're going to buy it or steal it. You're going to write.
Yeah.
And I always thought myself more a writer, but I approached performing. I didn't have a theatrical background, but I had an athletic background, and I approached performing like wrestling. It was a match to me, and I
Yeah.
had to win, and I put everything into it. Um, I was no Richard Pryor, but I idolized Richard Pryor for a lot of reasons. One was he put everything into his performance. I mean, you could see him
Yeah.
sweat up there, and he was physical. And so I sort of patterned myself that way, and so I put a lot of energy into it. I thought, well, I
Yeah.
may not have. Whatever I had, I just said I've got to do this full on. That's all. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I know Bill says that, and I remember one time, Uncle Dirty. You remember Uncle Dirty?
Yes.
He was a contemporary George Carlin and Pryor, and he was around the Improv. He was the elder statesman at the Improv in New York City, and my friend Mike McDonald told me this years later. One time they were sitting in the back room, and I was on stage, and Uncle Dirty turned to him and says, "That guy sure can dance," and that was it. I go, okay, I took that as a huge compliment. I mean, I just was
Yeah.
moving. That's all.
Yeah. When you were in high school and stuff, even though you weren't thinking about comedy and stuff, were you just like a natural funny guy? I mean, easygoing.
I didn't think so, but friends later told me you were always funny. Like entertaining people at the table lunchtime. But everybody I knew was funny. All the guys I knew, hung out with, I didn't think I was the funniest guys. I didn't think I was the funny amongst the guys I was hanging out with. I
Yeah.
thought we were all
Yeah.
funny. I think everybody was funny back. It's like that song, the Animals song. When I was young, we laughed louder. We laugh louder when you're young. You laugh louder. Everything was funny to us, and we
Yeah.
mocked
Yeah.
everything, and we busted each other's. We sort of
Right.
mocked each other, and I didn't think I was especially more funny than any of those guys. I needed to do it more than they did. That's obvious. None of those
Yeah.
guys that I hung out with ever took the microphone and went on stage in front of strangers to make them laugh. I needed
Yeah.
that approval. I needed that.
Did you, when you go back to did you go back to where you grew up, where you went to high school and everything quite often, or you go once in a
Yeah,
while?
I'm going back. I usually once a year, once every couple of years, I go up there. I have a lot of affection for the place and people there.
What do your friends think of you now being who you are? And you are
No, I'm not.
Sir
I'm
Richard
not.
Snyder.
Yes, sir. When they hear I'm benighted, but I'm Sir Shydner, they're gonna. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we get together, we talk about the old times and try to have some laughs and do things, and
Yeah.
it's I don't think anybody looks at me and goes, "Well, he's." There's a guy in the next town was Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis grew up in the town
Ooh.
Pennsgrove. I grew up in Pennsville. He grew up in the next town, Pennsgrove. Now that's a whole different level. I mean, of fame. I think last time I heard somebody told me they have this thing like the most famous people in each county in New Jersey, and my county was Salem County. I think I was
Right.
second to Bruce Willis, but I think it was second like 5,000 miles behind first place second.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
I
think
got
I
you.
was second. So no, I
I
don't
got
know.
you.
But I've probably been eclipsed by. There was a couple of ball players. I think a hockey player. There's always something. You know what I mean?
Oh
It's
yeah.
not a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
deal. It's not a big deal to my friends. I don't think.
No, and it wasn't to mine either. When I would come home from LA to visit my mom and dad before Gracie and I got married, um, you know, people would say, "Oh, I saw you on Hill Street Blues. You make a good crash dummy," because that's what I was always getting. I was always getting beat up. I mean,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
always playing a drug dealer, a drug addict, whatever the case may be, and I was always getting beat up. But it paid the rent back then, because you remember back in Hollywood, back in
Oh
those days,
man,
rent was very little, man.
very
I
little,
mean,
and
my
the
first,
residual checks were very big. That's
yeah,
right.
my apartment was at the Franklin Astoria, right up the road, right off of La Brea and Franklin, and it was a dump. I mean, my roommate Art was an engineer at A&M Records, but still, we still lived in kind of a dump. But yeah, I mean, the residuals I get
Was that
now
one of
are.
those? Was that one of those like little? I'm not sure. You tell me. Is that one of those like almost like a hotel? There's like 8 or 12 units. There was a little pool.
Um,
Remember all those kind of places out in
yeah, yeah,
LA?
yeah. It was 4 stories or 5 stories with about
No. That's a
10
no.
units.
Yours is different. I'm talking about ones where like 2 stories, and the
Yeah.
and the 12 units would be kind of wrapped around the pool. These little places,
Oh, well,
and it was managed. It's always managed by a guy who was like a third lead on a sitcom 20 years earlier, right? And he was wound up there running out the string in LA. It's just going,
Yeah, yeah.
well, it's over, and I'm managing this place and selling a little weed on the side, something.
Oh God, there was so many guys you run into, Rich, in LA that were like running out the string and just
Yeah.
hoping and praying you'd see him here and there and everywhere. When when did you first get on stage? And were you in Washington, D.C.? Were you like, were you, because the first time I ever got on stage, in spite of my uncle and everything, I was nervous. I mean, I was like, I don't even have a
Yeah.
routine here, but I'm getting up, I'm doing impressions. That's what I did. I did
Oh, okay.
impressions.
You did impressions. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my mom found the old Kennedy albums, the first family albums back in the day,
Ah,
and I started mimicking those. To which my father said, "You're never going to go anywhere doing voices and stuff." And Tubby at the dinner table one night went and said, "Yeah, you'd be surprised where he may go." So although that wasn't my dream. My dream was to be an airline pilot, not a comedian. But after the Air Force, that kind of died out. But what was it like for you the first few times? Because some people will get on stage and they'll hit a home run the first night. Next night they go
no,
back, or next week and they bomb.
no, I was terrible. I was terrible. I, I, I probably came across reciting the material. I'd written things and I know it was terrible, and I had no performing skills. It's not like I could rely on my anything that I'd done before. It was a totally different experience, and the transition, going from being funny in a moment around your friends to being funny on demand in front of strangers. When you walk up there
Oh,
and
yeah.
those eyes hit you, see that you made a contract with the audience. The contract is they're going to come and sit and listen in exchange for you making them laugh. And when you don't fulfill your end of the contract, problems happen. First of all, they get disappointed real fast.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then usually they start getting hostile. I mean, you've
Yeah.
broken the contract. So I couldn't fulfill the contract for them. I just wasn't, didn't know how to perform. It took time. And of course, but every time I got any kind of, in my first time I did it, I got one reaction in the, whether the 5, 6 minutes I did it, I'm not even sure how long. One guy went, like that, like those ones where he starts to laugh but nobody around him laughs, so you stop, because
Yeah.
people laugh
Yeah.
because other people are laughing. He's like, huh. It was, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't, I thought it was funny, but I'm wrong, you're right. So he that was it for me, but that was enough because I knew instinctively, without anybody telling me or even me consciously knowing it, that that guy did not know me before I walked on the stage, and I
Yeah.
got some reaction from him, and that was
Yep.
enough to make me come back again and do it again.
How were the comedy clubs back then
There were no
compared?
comedy clubs. None. This
That's
was
true.
1977.
Oh, yeah.
1977. There were comedy scenes, not yet in DC, but there was comedy scenes in about 6 cities: Boston, New York, LA, of course, Chicago, Houston. I think had a comedy scene by then, and Philadelphia, I think, was starting one by right at that time. So
Right.
these were comedy scenes, and then of course you had the two heavyweights, Chicago. I mean, in L.A. the big showcase scenes in New York and L.A.
Hmm.
But those other places had little communities, but there was
Yeah.
nothing. I knew nobody. I ran into Lewis Black by accident at because I was crashing all these hootenannies, they called them, or where singer songwriters were doing it, and I'd go talk my way into doing a couple of minutes of comedy,
Yeah.
and then I said, "Oh, I saw him, and oh, there's another guy doing this." That's the first
I
time I
like
saw anybody else
I
do it.
like Lewis Black. I really do. I just I enjoy Lewis so much. I don't know what he's like off stage. I would love
He's
to
a
get in
nice
touch with
guy.
him.
And my,
Are you still in
he.
touch with him at all?
No, no, I'm not. I saw him in Vegas a couple of years ago. He took me to lunch. Very nice. Look, the thing is, when Lewis first started, he had the same mannerisms, the same act as he did now. He'd get apoplectic, right? And back then, because he was young, he looked nervous. It wasn't funny.
Yeah.
And then he aged into it, right? Where he's now, you know, this is just my opinion. Rodney attracted a younger audience. If you're older and coming back into stand up, you have to attract a younger audience because that's who's going out. That's who's paying the
Right.
money going out.
Right.
And Rodney attracted our generation. He attracted the boomers because he represented what was then the tarnishing of the American dream. You can be anything you want. He was that loser that, right? I don't get no
Yeah.
respect. And we all kind of went, yeah, we got that. You know what I mean? That's what's happening now. And
Yeah.
that was, and I think Lewis was sort of like, he represented our generation. He represented the baby boomers. As parents of the younger people, we look like poodles barking at a freight train. We're always yelling at the TV, and we're,
Yeah.
and that was comical to younger generation. An older guy getting all upset and cursing and screaming. He was funny.
Yeah.
He's very funny.
Oh, it is. Joining us on Main Street this week is Sir Ritch Shydner. Gary Allen with you. Tommy, put up this scroll down here with Rich's contact information for people. If you want to call and book Ritch,
No,
or
Gmail.
you want
Do a Gmail instead of AOL, Tommy.
oh, okay. Oh, it's Gmail because I got the
Shides at Gmail.
Okay, I did. I got it from somewhere. It's at AOL.com. So
Nah, that's okay. I mean, I still have it, but I never go there.
okay, but Sir Ritch Shydner is informing us of his comedy background. There we go. There you go. Go to Ritch Shydner gmail.com. Give him a call. He's great. He's always home, and you wake him up after a nap.
Well, I answer the phone for other organizations, so don't worry about it.
Yeah,
and I get drugs calling me at 2 a.m. Don't worry.
What? Before we're going to get into your one-man show here in just a little bit, but you wrote for Jeff Foxworthy. You co-wrote 2 comedy albums, which are Grammy nominated. You also wrote for Bill Maher. You also wrote for television. But there is one question I do have for you. On Married with Children, you had the name of Luke Venture.
Ventura.
Was somebody
Luke Ventura?
Oh, I thought it was Venture. It's that's what Ventura. Was somebody a porn fan back then that wanted to give you Luke? I mean.
Yeah, well, the Ron Levitt and Michael Moy created the series. I don't know how they came up with the name Ventura, like it was California. Maybe they just went with that. But it was great. But I lost that role as soon as I won it because Fox picked me over Michael Moy's friend as an actor, and of course, then one of the creators wasn't much of a fan of mine. But I enjoyed doing it. Ed O'Neill, Katie Seagal. I mean, I just had a great time doing it. And then I got the Hollywood. Every week I'd get a script. I did first 7 episodes, and every week I'd get a script on Friday. And one Friday I didn't get the script, so I called my agent. I didn't get the script because I did work on it on the weekend with my acting coach, and then go in and do it Monday reading. And he goes, "It's probably a delivery problem. I'll call you back." He calls me back. Goes, "Got bad news. You're fired."
Oh, geez.
That's how he let you know. That's how he let you know in Hollywood, man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just like, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, the same as when I lived in Las Vegas and I would audition. And finally, one of the agents said, "Gary, we love you. You're good at acting, everything else, but you look too much like," because I was combing my hair back then. "You look too much like Leno, and we just can't use you." It's just
look like Leno.
Yeah, I look like Leno. There,
like Leno.
If I do, and imagine my hair combed back, or if you check out some of my stuff on Facebook, you can see where it's.
I'd have to see a younger picture of you. I mean, I knew Jay very well back then, and
Jay
still do.
Jay was always so good to me. I mean, he was so nice to me and all that other good stuff.
Yeah.
And you did Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Yeah. Well, that was one of those movies where Eddie got a lot of guys who he remembered and liked or whatever from back in the day. He got us roles. I think Rick Overton did 2 of the Beverly Hills Cop things, and there were a lot of other comics from back then who did them. Because I worked with Eddie in Jersey, some things or whatever. But Eddie was, he was just kind of paying back a little bit of the guys you remember from back in the day.
Oh, absolutely, and it's different. Talk about, because you have booked rooms. You still book a few rooms here or there.
No, I don't. I did it.
You stopped doing that?
No, yeah, I booked a room here in Black Mountain, which is near Asheville. I booked it for a year. It was a music room. It was not a good room for comedy. Not good at all. It was cavernous, and that's not good. And I couldn't get acts who were good enough to overcome that because of the money was not big. So I was getting acts who were overblown middles, pretending to be headliners, and it was just wasn't working.
Yeah. But talk about comedy, and we're going to go through this as we go through the book too, but just briefly, young comedians today that look to you and say, "Hey, do you have any advice?" What do you give them? I mean, what do you say to them?
They first of all, I do talk to comics sometimes, and you have a lot more. They don't have any problem being hobbyists or amateurs today. You know, they're not intending to quit their day job. But that was not a possibility back in our day. You couldn't get stage
Nope.
time. You had to be all in. So that's totally different that way. Every other aspect of promoting yourself, you know, with social media, it's totally different. The only thing that remains the same is the construction of material. You know, the style may change to, you know, deadpan irony as opposed to, you know, vibrant sarcasm
Right.
or whatever. But
Right.
not sarcasm, was other things, satire is more. But I don't.
Yeah.
The only thing I tell them is get on stage as much as possible. Really, I mean, there's really not much. You know, teaching a class. I know a lot of people teach classes, and it can help the learning curve for a comic. But there's only one way to get better, and
Hmm.
that's just go on stage as much as possible. Now they have you know, every generation has a struggle to get on stage, get the microphone in your hand. And with ours, it was finding places that would let you do it. It would actually, you could do it. Today, there's a million places. Every town has a brewery or a bar, or somebody doing a comedy night at least once a month or once a, you know what I mean? There's a million places, but there's also 1,000. There's so many comics wanting to do it.
Yeah.
And to me, you know, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's like, it's something to do while you're drinking, you know. But back in the day, there was, you know, comedy clubs were part of this drinking circuit, right? They go
Yeah.
bowling one night, they go out to the sports bar another, and let's go to the comedy club another night.
And there,
And
and
it's still that way.
remember back in the day, because my uncle started there, Jay Leno started there. They did vaudeville, for God's sakes.
Well, that's all. That look, me talking to somebody today about what to do is like a vaudeville guy coming up and talking to me in 1980.
Yeah,
Seriously. I mean,
yeah,
50
probably
years
so.
ago, you know, we're almost 50. You know, we're talking, you know, if I say I started in 1980, I'll just round it off instead of officially 77 to 80. If I say I started 80, that's 45 years ago. So if somebody came up to me in 1980, right, that means that was 1935 that they were performing. That's vaudeville. You
Right.
know, it's
Yeah.
a totally
Yeah.
different. I couldn't relate to them, and they couldn't relate to me.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Again, we have on Main Street today Sir Richard Shydner joining us, and that's officially his name now. We're going to give him that title, Gary Allen, with you. Back when you first met your late ex-wife, excuse me, your ex-wife. I keep wanting to say late. Carol's not dead, that's for sure.
You have her
There
guest
was
on
only
sometime.
There was Joan Rivers, there was Toady Fields, there were Belle Barth down in Miami. There was a few
Pearl Williams,
female
also Miami. There was Rusty Warren. Of course, the great Phyllis Diller, who was the first female stand-up
Yes.
star, you know,
What was it
national
like for
star.
Yeah, what was it like for Carol and
Well,
women of her generation to
yeah.
even
So
get stage time?
yeah, but they had it. Look, Carol was all in. There were a lot of women back there. There was about 10% of all the comics. I did some, you know, research when I wrote a book called "Kicking Through the Ashes," and I had a chapter about it. And there were about 100 some comics in New York at the time, right?
Yeah.
Going in
Put
the
that
showcase clubs, about 100
Tommy, put
young
that up there.
comics.
Put that up there. The book "Kicking in with Ashes," please.
Kicking Through the Ashes, yeah.
Kicking through the ashes.
About 10% of the comics were women. There's a much higher percentage today, but that 10% was a huge jump back then because, as you said it, they were pretty much like one woman handing off the baton to another woman for a long
Yeah.
time. You know, there was a woman named Jean Carroll who was doing it before, and of course there were some other women too. But Jean Carroll was sort of like her or Mom's Mabley or
Jackie Moms.
yeah, or oh my gosh, I'm Minnie Pearl. You know, they were all three
Yeah.
started around the same time after, but I think Gene Carroll started in World War II doing stand-up comedy. So
Yeah.
and then they just were like the hand of baton off. So there was, you know, Joan Rivers wrote for Phyllis Diller, and then there's Toady Fields, and then, you know, and then the two women who really changed the way stand-up was going for women, I think, were Lily Tomlin and Elaine Boozler in the 70s,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
they you know, because women were doing there was a woman who did a study in Toronto, sociologist who studied women's and men's recordings of comedy back then. and she found that women were doing self-deprecating material around 74% of the time, and guys
Really?
were only doing self-deprecating material about 11% of the time. And so
Wow.
Elaine and Lily completely flipped that. I mean, you can look at Lily's, first couple of one-woman shows, and which were stand-up and all, and there was hardly any self-deprecating at all. I think maybe she had one line that said, I think she said, I when I was young, I wished to be famous. I should have been more specific.
More specific.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
maybe that, but that nothing. And Elaine was the same way. She banged on men in terms of dating and sex and all that, the way guys were banging on women back then. She didn't. Couldn't kowtow to everybody, and so she changed it. And so a lot of the women that I came along with, because Elaine
Yeah.
was a little bit ahead of us on the path, they idolized Elaine. I mean, I know for a fact, Carol. I mean, they did. They looked up to her, and she did change the way things were going for women back then.
Yeah. Yeah. And remember the comedy duos, Ben Stiller's mom and dad, Jerry and his mom.
The teams,
they were funny.
The teams were great, but the teams became less. Lenny Bruce is really probably the greatest one to start really personalizing stand-up. And so you had to be conversational, and teams always look like, they're doing a bit. They're,
Yeah.
so it's hard to, as much as Robin Williams could disguise things he's done a million times and make it look like it was off the top of his head, which is part of his genius. But I think the Star Brothers today, I don't count teams as stand-up because they can talk to each other. And in stand-up, one person has to perform completely with the audience. And
Right.
teams don't have to do that, right? But the Sklar
Right.
brothers today, I've seen them do monologues where they're finishing each other's sentences. They're actually doing a monologue as a team. It's very interesting to watch to me. But otherwise, the teams kind of became less when the requirement to become conversational grew, and that the acts had to look like they were just kind of coming up with it on the spot.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. But there were some great teams, though. There were great teams in my era, and Mac and Jamie were killer act, and there were other teams that were good.
Yeah. Tom Dreesen, who's been on the show, who's an old friend of mine from my days in Chicago, because I lived in Chicago.
Right.
He came out there with Tim. And but remember Elaine May? She was also doing.
Well, that was back
with
when
Mike Nichols.
That was an earlier time. I'm just saying, I'm talking about the 80s. But
yeah,
it was always a problem economically, because until they got famous and could set their price, right? Even in vaudeville, that's why stand-ups came up more and more. Back in the later part of the 19th century, teams ruled supreme because they didn't engage with the audience. So I didn't want to engage with the audience. They mostly beat each other up with sticks. That's where you got the phrase slapstick. But teams were big, and then vaudeville, there's like, well, if I work by myself, I get the same pay I got with two guys. I don't have to split it. So stand-ups became, much more attractive.
And I also think that when it came to teams during our generation, Ritch, or Sir Ritch, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Sir Ritch will be fine.
Sir Ritch will be fine. But when I remember it was the Ed Sullivan Show, and he loved to have, family acts.
They were great teams. They were great teams. Yeah.
Yeah. What, Tommy, when we start talking about this book, I want to have it up there and then put the scroll up. You have written a number of books on comedy with Bill Maher. You've written a lot of other things.
No, I didn't. Bill wrote the book. I wrote an adaptation for a screenplay. I wrote the adaptation for a movie.
But you have always been a writer in a sense. You've had a wonderful career as a writer, besides being a wonderful stand-up. What was the first thought? When did you start thinking, I want to write a book about stand-up comedy and comics and what it says about America? And we'll go through the decades as fast as we possibly, although we have a half hour or so to go, almost 20 minutes actually. When did you start thinking about writing this book? Years before you started writing it?
I met I think about my third Tonight Show in 1986. Phyllis Diller called me. I became friendly with her, had a few lunches with her and whatnot, and we talked. a lot about. She was a real student of stand-up comedy, and we both thought that Mark Twain was the first stand-up comic. And I started
Oh,
reading Mark Twain, and I wrote an essay to Mark Twain. Said that the funniest guy he ever saw was a man named Artemus Ward. And when I started reading about him, I saw this is the first stand-up comic. And so I talked to Phyllis about that, and she's like, "You got to write a book on it." And I couldn't make the book funny. I mean, it was so dry, and I was getting hung up with all these, references and annotations, and it just bogged me down. And my wife was like, "Why don't you just go on stage and see if you can make it funny there? That's where you
yeah.
make things funny." And that's
Yes.
how the show started. But I don't know. I mean, I could write a book, obviously, but the takes I came up with and the things that I discovered researching it. Um, Fascinated me. It just pulled me in. But that's
Yeah.
that's it.
Tommy, put up the picture of the book, Stand Up. Uh, no, not
Oh,
that one. The other
I'm in.
one.
You know what? I love that. I'm on that. I didn't even know that till like just a couple of years ago. Some guy told
Really?
me that I'm on that DVD as one of the. There's a
Yeah.
bunch of comics on there. It's our first shots. Like Stephen Wright and Rita Rudner, I think, and um uh, uh there are a bunch of comics that are for Bill Kirkenbauer's on. I know for sure. There's a lot
Oh,
of comics. No, that's my book. Yeah, that's
yeah.
one that book I killed. Mark Schiff and I think what they call us co-compilers. So we got people's stories to
Yeah.
put in the book. We were
Yeah.
co-compilers. It's almost co-conspirators, really. But
Now, try the other one, Tommy. I think it was. It's kind of got a
you
brownish
had it
color to it.
earlier. Yeah, you had it earlier.
No,
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 that's it.
no.
That's the documentary I did with Jordan Brady. Jordan Brady directed it,
There's
and
it's kind
yeah.
of a brown cover on it. It's kind of an equal square. I know I sent it to you. There you
Yeah.
go.
No, that's one of my old ads for the stand up history show.
Oh, okay. All
I
right.
called it
All right.
America's Reflection in the Funhouse Mirror, which I like that title or whatever.
Okay.
Kicking Through the Ashes is the name of the book that I wrote in 2016. And I just got to the point. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I got to the point where I was just putting all these stories together and writing them and going back. You just have kind of like looking back at your career, and that kicking through the ashes to me was always that, if a house burns down and you see somebody there kicking through the ashes, see if they can find anything of value. And that's where I got
Yeah.
the title.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is because you see people come and go in the business so much. How
Yeah.
has the business changed? A lot from
Well,
when
it's
you
bigger
got
than
to
ever.
go. Oh
Stand-up
yeah.
comedy is bigger than ever. Back when I was first looking at stand-up comedy, I saw George Carlin on GW campus, I think it was.
Hmm.
I saw Robert Klein at American University campus. And
Okay.
the
Yeah.
only person who was doing theaters regularly, in fact, he ended up doing arenas, was Steve Martin. That's one guy. There are 20, 30 comics today who could fill arenas, probably do arenas. There are so many comics doing theaters. It's ridiculous how many there are. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it's bigger than ever. It's huge. And I put a video out about this. I think it's become, for the people today, young people today, a generational gathering point. And that's always important to have. Back in our day, it was rock concerts. We showed up to rock
Yeah.
concerts, and you look in the crowd, there's 13, 15,000 of you looking around going, we're all the same age. We're all the kind of the same mindset. Look at our power, right?
Hmm.
It's and music's kind of fallen behind. I think there's not any great bands anymore, not many great bands, and
No.
and live music is sort of tainted a little bit, because you don't know whether they're doing tracks up there, if they're lip syncing. And comedy is truthful. You don't fake a laugh. That comic's either making you laugh or they're not. And people,
Hmm.
and so I think there's a lot of attraction for people now. I mean, it's bigger than ever.
The one thing that I don't like, Rich, Sir Rich, excuse me, I apologize, Your Royal Highness.
Yeah,
But the
we're
one thing,
rural. Yeah, you
Your
almost
Royal
said it.
Highness,
You're
Your
right.
Royal
Yeah,
Highness,
Heine. I
you
used to
got to
tell it
you.
as a kid, Shiny Heine, because my last name was Shydner. So of course they went Shiny Heine.
um, I don't like dirty comics.
Yeah.
I told Will Shriner this. I told Chris DePetta this. I've seen so many young females up on stage now that are so graphic,
Yeah.
not just the F bombs, but I mean so
Uh-huh.
graphic about, and you don't need to be. Back in the day when you were in LA and others were in LA, like Jerry and Carol. By the way, we keep talking about Carol Leifer. Carol Leifer was, I
She's
believe, was
still
she not?
alive, everybody. She's still
Yes,
alive.
and she was that she worked with Jerry. I believe she was
Yeah.
considered the head writer on Seinfeld. I believe, if I'm not giving her
I
a
think
position that
I think Larry David was, but I know she wrote on Seinfeld.
yeah, and but that was Sir Richard's ex, and so but back in those days, you wanted to be funny to get on the Tonight Show. You didn't want to be
That you're
dirty.
talking about the change right there. That's part of the change. No, the talk shows, late night talk shows are pretty much irrelevant. I mean, you go in
Yeah.
there and they do it. I'm sure comics do it, but it's not making you your career as it did 40, 50 years ago with the
Oh no
Tonight
no
Show
no
or
no no.
Letterman.
When
So
Johnny would
it's
call
totally
you,
different.
yeah,
Totally,
well, you did the
society's
Tonight
different.
Show. You did the Tonight Show. You
Yeah,
did the
yeah.
Letterman. You
Work
did it with
clean. We
Leno.
all work clean to get on the
Yes.
Tonight Show. Right. Right.
Yeah. When did you? By the way, we'll get back to the book here in a second. But when did you find out you were going to do the Tonight Show? Did you have sort of an inkling leading up to, like other
No,
comics, and then?
I got some advice when I first got out there, and I took it to heart. Jay Leno says, "Don't bug." Jim McCulley was the main guy booking young comics on the Tonight Show, and Jay told me, he says, "Don't bug him. Don't let him find you." And I never bugged him. I never looked for him, never tried to get into a conversation where he was involved. I avoided him like he's a leper. And then in 1984 in the summer, the Olympics were coming to LA, and I had a
Mhm.
sense that they were going to destroy comedy in LA at that time. Just the tourists and the foreign tourists, which I had a little experience of. You get people who can't really speak the language in the clubs, and the traffic was getting all redirected, and it was going to be a problem. I thought it was going to be a problem. So I said, I'm going to go back to New York City for the summer. And I was friends with a guy named Sam Kennison at the time.
Oh
And you probably
yes.
remember Sam. And Sam said he'd never been in New York. I said, well, come with me, Sam. I think they'll love you there. And he was getting really good in LA, but he hadn't broken out of the late night slot yet that they kind of stuck him in. And so we went to New York, and we were partying, man. We were out of control, but I was doing my sets. And one night at the New York Improv, I had a killer set. I came off. Jim McCulley approached me and says, "You're ready to do the Tonight Show." Flat out said, "You're ready to do the Tonight Show." And
How
that's
about that?
it. And it gave me a date, and we worked out the material. And 2 weeks later, I was on the Tonight Show. And
How did that feel,
and
man, when you stood there? Did
you
with
can't
Johnny?
it's so surreal to me. I mean, I'm a kid. My dad loved the Tonight Show. He watched it all the time. I had to become older myself to watch it. Johnny Carson was iconic for stand-up. He was the gatekeeper. He was, it was the quickest way to get approval in showbiz was Tonight Show. And
Yeah.
I broke out in shingles when I did my first Tonight Show. I was 31 years old and broke out in shingles. And I went in to see a doctor. I didn't even know what they were. I had this huge rash, a bleeding rash on my butt cheek and my back of my thigh. Because shingles
Mhm.
is the virus comes out, it's from chicken pox when you're a kid. The virus goes in your spine and comes back out. And
Yeah.
it was painful. And he gave me, I had medicated pads I had to wear so I didn't bleed through to my pants. And I did the Tonight Show with shingles the first time. He said, "What do you?" Well, look. It was stressful to do the Tonight Show, but I wasn't helping my stress. I was doing a lot of I was doing a lot of alcohol and cocaine, so I was not helping my stress level. But
Right.
anyway, I managed to clean up enough to do the Tonight Show the first time and did great. It was fine.
Well, next time try aluminum siding, would you please? Thank you. I'll be here all week and try the meatloaf
I
special.
thought you were talking about Rodney Dangerfield selling aluminum siding.
Oh, Rodney was something else. I got to meet him once through Tubby.
Oh
I got
man,
to meet him once.
sorry
Let's
man.
get
You're
back
all
to.
right. You're
I
all
don't
right, kid.
care.
You're all right.
You're all right. Hey,
You're all right. All right.
Hey,
You know my doctor, Benny Boom Butts.
Hey, yeah. But like I was saying, dirty comics, and that was a change. Then more and more females started coming
Look,
along, like Carol and others.
Carol, and back in that day, I could talk more graphically about sex than she could, and the women didn't think they could, or it was hard to break through. And so Carol would do old jokes if she thought the audience wanted to get a little down and dirty. She would do old jokes at the end of her act, right? Nothing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
blow you for the toaster, or, that's kind of thing. And I rang the doorbell, didn't I? That was another one. So it was a totally different time. In fact, she and a lot of women back then wore jackets, like sport jackets kind of thing, over top to keep their breasts out of the show. Because guys literally in the audience would yell, "Show us your," you know what I mean? They would yell that
Really?
out. Absolutely. They had to deal with that. I remember once when I smacked the guy in the back of the head in Atlanta because he yelled it twice, and I was able to find him the second time. And I smacked him in the back of the head and said, "Say it again, I'll get you in the front of the head." And he didn't do it again. But guys would yell that out, and not and women had to deal with that. And so it was different. Society was different, just in terms of being clean. Back then, if you worked blue, right? Like say Bobby Slayton worked blue. He didn't
Yeah.
care, if he's going to. He worked blue. Well, the Comedy Magic Club, other nightclubs, comedy clubs back then, would bill him as a special act. Look out, he's X-rated. Look out. They
Yep.
would warn the audience.
Yep.
Well, today they'll warn the audience that the comic's going to be clean. Clean has become a specialty act now, like its own branch of comedy. Comics who work clean, because the comics now generally curse and the audience just expects it. It's a different
Yeah.
time, a different society.
And talking about their body parts and what they do with them and everything else.
Look, but you're familiar with burlesque back in the day. There was
Yes. Oh, yeah.
vaudeville. Vaudeville was super clean.
Yeah.
Burlesque was naughty, and burlesque had the baggy pants comics doing off-color jokes, dirty jokes back then, mostly innuendo. And then the women in sketches were barely dressed, and today they've combined that. The women do most of the dirty jokes and stuff on stage now are done by women, and they dress like Vegas party girls. So they have combined that. I first saw it, I went, this is kind of like stand-up stripper. And back in our day, and it's always classic, that comics and strippers were attracted to each other. I always wondered about that fact that comics and strippers were working together, and burlesque was probably part of it. But also, comics bear themselves emotionally on stage, and strippers bear themselves physically. So they had some sort of, I think, a little bit more psychic connection than just the fact that they were working together. But today it's just a different time, and women love the fact that women could talk. The double standards have been completely flipped on stage. Back in my day, women couldn't talk about sex that much. And today, if a guy goes on stage and brags about, being with a lot of women, the way a woman can brag today about being with a lot of guys, a guy would get labeled a dog. Women would not like it. Guys, guy can't talk about it like that today. And a woman can talk about today. That completely flipped the double standard.
Talk about some of your heroes. I know that I've got a little bit here. You admired Art Carney, obviously Lenny Bruce, Red Skelton, and and of course George Carlin. But talk about
Robert Klein. Robert Klein was huge to me. I mean, nobody made me laugh harder. I saw him in American University. I literally nearly fell out of the bleachers. It was in the gymnasium. There was a lot of people there, a few thousand people, and he was as funny as you got. Pryor, of course, I saw him live at the Comedy Store. I never saw him live in a concert situation, but Carlin was, Carlin, those are. And then I saw people, and I learned a lot from comics who were even at my level. I learned from them. Seinfeld was very instructive. Seinfeld, probably one of the greatest joke writers of my generation, also put more thought into the mechanics and the performance of stand-up than anybody I knew back then. I mean, Jerry, you talk to him and he would break it down. He was the first guy that ever broke down joke timing to me. What it was really, So there were a lot of people to learn from. Franklin Ajay was very nice to me when I first started.
Oh yeah, and I go back to Mort Saul. I go back even further. There were these political commentators of the day. There aren't many of them around. I have a friend of mine, Mark Riccondano, who kind of does that a little bit.
Great guy.
And he does a little bit of that. And you were talking about other.
You can't do it today like that. You can't.
No.
You have to pick a side. If you start doing jokes about the Republicans, the Democrats will laugh. The Republicans will hate you, and they won't and then you go back to do jokes about the Democrats, and Democrats will hate you. Republicans won't even like you anymore because you already lost them earlier.
Isn't it amazing
you
how
can't be Will Rogers today? You can't.
No, you can't, and it drives me crazy. It used to be okay if Sir Ritch Shydner was a Republican and I'm a Democrat, we disagreed, but we were still friends. Nowadays, if you don't agree with me, you're my enemy, and it's really just it's terrible.
It's incredible. I just lost a guy I've known since the 6th grade. I've known this guy 60 years, and he's unfriended me. I mean, he said he's wants nothing to do with me because we're on different sides of the political aisle. And I've tried to not be like that with people, but unless you show me you're a racist or something. I mean, I don't have a lock on things. I don't know what I'm a comic. I'm just a comic. I have an opinion, but I don't try not to voice my opinion publicly unless I can make it funny. That's
Rich,
my
you're not
to talk publicly.
You're not just a comic. Okay.
No, but seriously. I mean,
No, I mean, yes, I understand because
I'm not
when
a
it gets down,
analyst, I'm not James Carville or
he's great. Now, I love James, but
he cracks
that
me
LSU
up,
that LSU education really cracks
great,
me up.
Man. He cracks me up. He does, man. He's a straight out, man. He is.
Oh yeah. Would you please put up the banner for people to get a hold of Sir Richard? Now he's become Sir Richard. There you go. Give him a call.
No, I'm not. I'm not Richard. I'm not even Richard on my birth certificate.
Really?
No, I'm Richie.
It's just Rich.
Yeah, I was named after my dad's favorite baseball player, Richie Ashburn, for the Philadelphia Phillies.
The Phillies, yes.
Yeah, she thought you spelled Richie with a T because she lived along Ritchie Highway in Baltimore. Right? It's an English last name, right? Guy Ritchie, the director. So that's how I got to be Ritch Shydner.
But anyway, please call this number. Get a hold of him on email.
Call this number. Please help this man.
Please help this man. We're going. Let's go to the tote board. Ed, what do we see right here? I actually worked with Ed McMahon in Las Vegas doing the slot machine shows.
One more old comic doing a fundraiser. I know.
Oh yeah, he was a good guy.
I gotta go.
What?
Go ahead.
Wait, we've got a few minutes left. What's on the horizon for you? Where are you, besides doing your one-man show around the country?
No, I don't know. I mean, I'm doing these videos I put on every day. I'm doing these videos. I'm just
I love them.
Interesting to me. It's I don't know where I'm going with it, but I'm doing them. I have a ton of ideas still to do. My wife and I like producing them together, and then these other people kind of finish them off and get the captions on and on. I'm doing that, and I'm doing this stand-up history show. That's what I really like doing. That's what I love doing. And I do stand-up when people ask me. I don't have any. I'm not. There's things I don't have to do anymore. I don't do them. I don't want them. But people ask me to do it if it's a nice gig stand-up. I do it. I still like that people laugh, and I like that music.
Well, it's funny because before we went on the air, you did a thing about Lord Buckley, who I was weaned on to a certain. I have cassettes of him. I don't know what I can do with them now because there's no more cassette players. And then you talked about my uncle, Tubby Boots. And I'm like, was Rich aware of that? I'm
no, I was not aware. No.
The kid from Baltimore.
I could probably do 10 videos on Lord Buckley. There's so many stories about this guy. He was really a wild guy. And
he was up.
He is. So I love doing stories about him.
He was up before some committee. He was supposed to testify, I believe is what Tubby told me. I think that's what Tubby told me. That he was supposed to testify before some Senate committee about the mob.
No, I don't think so.
Suddenly he
disappeared. I read the book about him. No, I think he was supposed to. He was having a problem with his card. He had to have a cabaret card in New York City back then to perform, and they were denying him a cabaret card in New York City, which was a big market for him.
Yeah,
and he was going to try to go have another hearing when he died.
Or maybe that was it.
Frank Sinatra was actually a fan of and was trying to get them to drop this ridiculous. You had to have like a license to perform in front of an audience that was drinking alcohol. That was basically it. And it was sort of like a scam in New York City was doing this, so a few other cities were doing.
Real quick, you just brought up something interesting, and I want to hit this real quick. It has nothing to do with comedy. But if it wasn't for guys like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, black performers would still have been treated for years after like dirt under their feet. You could perform in the big rooms, but you can't live here. You can't sleep here. You can't go to. I've never understood this mentality.
because
Yeah,
because it was racist. That's what the mentality was.
it was.
You know,
And you
pure
know, so, and you know,
racist.
so, and Rich, you know something? The racism is still there. It's still stronger than
It's
ever. It's bigger than
people
ever.
people. You know, I laughed a couple of years ago. The Supreme Court had a decision basically saying we don't need to enforce the Civil Rights Act anymore because racism ended in America. That's laughable. It's absolutely
No,
laughable.
no. You know what racism comes from? My father used to say, and Tubby even agreed with my dad once on this. He said, racism comes from people who fear something they don't know and they
That's
don't
true.
want to know it. And they
It's
don't
true.
want to know it because they're afraid. Oh, I don't want my
Well,
kid to learn about Muslims in school. Why? It's not
no,
going to make him a Muslim. And this
that,
bull crap about going off to school and your son is going to become home a woman, not a little boy anymore. That's bull crap. It's all
yeah,
right
it's
wing bull
crazy.
crap. But
You know,
anyway, listen.
they do well. They do well driving people with fear. You can get more action with people with fear than love. That's a sad state of the human
It is a
race.
sad state of affairs, and I will
All
tell
right.
you, it really is. But I want to thank you from the bottom of my
Thank you.
heart.
Thank you.
This has
Thank
been
you.
a real treat to finally get you on here. You will come back at some point. We're going to talk again.
I expect to see
But
my commendation raising me to Sir Ritch Shydner. I expect to see that soon. And I'll talk to you. Oh, my wife is coming in. All right.
oh,
I
your
gotta
wife
go.
is coming. All right. Well,
I
listen,
gotta go.
Rich. All
All
right,
right.
Rich. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
very much. I will
Thank you,
call you
Lee.
in a couple days and we'll speak.
All right. Bye.
All right. And I want to thank all of you out there very much for taking the time to join us here on Main Street with Ritch Schneider. I call him Snyder, but you know. And we hope you enjoyed the show. We hope nothing but the best for you. And we'll be back next week with another show. Until then, please take care of yourselves. Take care of everyone around you. And God bless. Bye-bye for now.